I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do we even need transport? Or transportation systems.
Or transportation, that's always a topic we should consider. Can we do this without having to move people and goods?
But what happens when we don't move people and goods?
Yep.
Like with the human interaction and that kind of thing.
Yep.
I think that's the danger of not having transport.
I think transport, it brings access to places and people when we're talking about people transport. And when we're talking about goods transport, it's a lot of the supply of the necessities that we need. But I think we should question what we really need, because in reality, from a sustainability point of view, we are over-consuming.
Yeah.
So what are the necessities that we actually need to transport? And then what we also should have, can we do it in a better way? Can we do it in a more efficient way? And that's where autonomous comes in.
Could you give an example of how you're doing it at Scania in terms of looking at production and consumption and sustainability?
It is difficult to electrify a truck today, a 40-ton truck that has a driver that needs to drive 4.5 hours due to the working time directive. That's a lot of energy in a battery, which means that it's very tricky to electrify today. But once you remove the driver or the driving part, that constraint of having to drive as long as you're allowed to at very high speeds, you can start reshaping and redefining the way the transport system is set up. And then you need different products. And I think the NXT that we showcased is a good example of thinking slightly out of the box.
When you talk about sustainability, we're used to talking about climate and all that kind of stuff. But we're trying to shift even more into that sustainability has to do with people, tech, and all the other aspects. And one of the initiatives that are coming out of the work that I'm doing is also looking at how are we using the things that we've already produced. We already have loads of trucks. We can't just get rid of them. But what we're doing, like these glasses are made out of, what was it, iPhone case, like glass, and like how can we reuse things that we've already done, and also how does that affect the people around us, not just people in Sweden, but the people that we're affecting in Brazil, in China, and all the other industries that we're in. So like looking at sustainability from a broader perspective.
So it becomes a global economic question, a conversation rather.
I believe it does.
Exactly.
And taking that circular economy where you remanufacture and recycle, etc. And when you close the circle on everything.
You create that efficiency internally, and then you can build the same philosophies out to the places that you work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought it was really cool what you were saying before, the interesting difference that we need to draw between autonomous and automated.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand that?
I think it's, automation has been around as a technology for many years, and even in the vehicle industry, especially in automated guided vehicles that we see in factories and in harbors, etc. But a lot of that technology is rather stupid. It follows a GPS track or magnetic strip or something, and when there's an obstacle, it stops and it calls for help. Now we're introducing the autonomous technology, which means that we introduce that intelligence, that whenever there's an obstacle, when there's something hindering it fulfilling its mission, it will actually be able to solve that.
How does it know? How does it work?
Well, the technology is maturing enough in order to be able to make those decisions real time, and that's what's happening right now. And that's why I think we're seeing so much happening in the industry regarding autonomous vehicles, because all the various technologies, the camera, the computational power, etc., everything is maturing into that stage, and suddenly the stars are aligned. And it can start to happen, and we can see the shift.
I think that goes back to the point that we were talking about earlier, that you can't look at technology in isolation. So it's old ideas, it's old problems, innovation, which is to me is problem solving. And now the technology, the digital technology, has come of age, that we can actually look at new ways of solving some of these.
Yeah, it is happening. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time before we can drive in a city, very complex, etc. With people on board. That's the most fragile load we can have on board, but it's starting to happen.
And who do you think is driving this? Is it the technology is driving it, or is it the idea that the problem that is driving the desire to find new technologies?
I think it's always the problem.
Okay.
I think, Personally,
Yeah.
I don't like driving my car. I find it quite boring to drive the ordinary family car on the motorway. It's not fun. You're not productive. You're not creating much value. Just holding the steering wheel and following the car in front of you. I think that problem has been a problem that's been around for even from the horses. Probably.
Going back to that, I'm one of those who actually like driving. I like driving a manual stick, like, all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
I love driving, too, but not the family
Not the family car on the motorway.
I'm not there yet. No, but I think that in that sense, if you go back to like the actual problem and like innovation versus entrepreneurship, if you're actually solving a problem, I think what you're talking about now is that I need to get to somewhere. Now, how do I get there? That's the problem that we need to solve rather than I need to remove the driving aspect of it using automation.
And introducing autonomous is not about getting rid of the driving part of it.
Yeah.
It's about being able not to have a driver-centric transport system, but rather having a flow-centric transport system where you can create that access to places and people.
But isn't there also an element of not so much fear, but the fact that it's a bit like the future of work.
Yeah.
That artificial intelligence will replace a certain repetitive aspect of that.
Yes.
And if most people in the Western world at least get their sense of potential through work, and that's taken out, what's left? What do we call that? And how do we then ensure that people are still reaching that potential or that sense of enjoyment when we automate and take some of that bit out?
When you start implementing that kind of thing, I know that a lot of people are really worried about, is it going to steal all our jobs?
And that always happens when we have a major technology shift.
Yeah.
Coming back to your point, I think humans can work with stuff that create more purpose. We are totally understaffed in hospitals, in schools, etc. More people can work in those with the social interactions, because that's where robotics and AI and automation doesn't come through. There's still a human element.
If you go back to like automation and all that kind of stuff, if we have robots or whatever you want to call it, doing that kind of thing so that people can actually use their skill sets to do the things they're good at and where they can actually contribute, I think that could be a real enabler.
What about the question of whether people are ready to be met by a bus that has no driver? Do you think that, what about civic trust? How are you approaching the challenge of, maybe prejudices people might have about having a civic infrastructure where they can't always see a person?
I think that's a really good point. It takes time to create that public acceptance and the public trust. But at the same time, we are skeptical on the new technology. We're a bit hesitant, etc. But for some reason, I never checked the status of a taxi driver.
No.
Yeah.
He could be on drugs. He could not have slept for 36 hours.
This does happen with Uber, where things do go wrong, but we still use it. We apparently in some situations are willing to accept a certain margin of error in exchange for convenience, as long as we know what the recourse in the event of error is.
Most people don't think about it, but when we cross the street today, we tend to look for the eyes of the driver, of the vehicle coming, whether it's a bus or a truck or a car. We look for that interaction to see that, yes, they've seen me, they will stop. That's safe for me to cross the road. And that will take time. Vehicles need to communicate to the pedestrians and the humans in its surroundings that, yes, I'm safe, I'm aware of you, etc.
How do you approach that? Is there going to be visual communication on some of these vehicles so that we still have that sense of contact?
Most likely, yes.
Interesting.
There's a lot of research ongoing in that human-machine interaction.
It's interesting because I live in southeast London and we have the Docklands Light Rail, which is an electric train with no driver. And you used to just see the kids sitting at the front going, oh my gosh, there's no driver. Now I've got on there with friends who are my age, so in their 40s, and they go, I want to sit at the front.
Everyone wants to sit at the front.
I want to sit at the front because there's no driver. And there's just
You can pretend you're driving it.
And there is this level of excitement going, I'm on transport that has no driver. There's conductors, but it's just this, ooh.
But do you find that the excitement of the light rail is more because it's on its own track and it's not really interfering with the rest of
knowing
the
that
rest of
it's
the
safe,
transport
knowing
system?
that nothing can go wrong?
Great question.
But now it's gonna be with all the other cars and where kids are walking, where cyclists are, and that's a whole different way of looking at it, I would assume.
I was having a conversation with another futurist a couple of weeks ago who said that he now puts more faith in artificial intelligence and technology than in humans because of the difference in statistical error. and I just went, oh, it gave me a real visceral response because we've been brought, I'm human, I interact with humans, and the idea that somebody is negating all of that and saying, well, the technology is going to be the thing that stops all of that, there's still a part of me that goes, where is the level of human interaction and responsibility within all of that?
I think we have to use what humans are really good at, and what technology is really good at. It could be that in some applications artificial intelligence will be superior to our human intelligence.
What do you think like the public needs, or what do we people need in order to accept this? Like what would make our transition easier?
Finding ways of making the technology relatable, I think, should help, and showing the human element at the back, so that it's not all going to be robots marching through our roads, showing the ingenuity of engineers, software designers, showing the people that are collaborating to make this technology possible, I think is going to be really key in terms of helping people accept this more.
To add to your point, I think of starting where people are at. So help making it relevant to them and their daily lives, and then it's a slightly easier shift because they can see the benefit.
The benefits,
so they can see the benefits for them, their immediate family, and their reality in whatever space, whether city, urban environment. How is it impacting them, and then how is it going to impact their relationship with their environment and their connection with their ability to connect with others and do the things that they need to do. And I think that's the starting point for telling the stories.